The alluring death of the Republic. 2,000 years ago, the Roman world was exhausted. Decades of civil war had left the streets stained and the markets empty. In this moment of deep fatigue, a young man named Octavian stood before the Senate. He didn't wear a crown, he wore a toga. He didn't demand the title of king, he took the title princeps, the first citizen. He told the people exactly what they wanted to hear. The war is over. I am restoring the Republic. But as he spoke, he was quietly absorbing the powers of every office. He became the commander of the legions, the voice of the people, and the high priest of the state. He kept the Senate House open, but he decided who sat in the chairs. He kept the elections, but he vetted the candidates. This is the Augustan pretense, the art of killing a republic by pretending to save it. It is the most successful political lie in human history, and today it is being retold in a dozen languages. To understand why we must fight for boring institutions, we have to understand what a republic actually is. It is not a feeling. It is not a flag. It is a written agreement. Think of a contract between a bank and a client, or two merchants in a dispute. When business is booming and the sun is shining, the contract stays in the drawer. You don't need it when everyone is cooperating. You need it when the storm hits. You need it when one party tries to cheat the other. A republic is a contract for the bad times of a nation. It is the only thing that stands between a peaceful disagreement and a bloodbath. In the 1930s, when the Nazi majority in Germany decided to strip the Jewish minority of their humanity, it was because the contract had been burned. We don't have checks and balances so the stronger can win. We have them so that justice can win. Without that contract, democracy is just three wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner. But the greatest threat to the contract isn't always a cartoon villain. Often, it is a man who sincerely believes he is a hero, like Donald Trump, who resolved a few unresolvable earlier issues like peace in the Middle East, uncontrolled immigration, Maduro rules in Venezuela, or ridiculous DEI ideology in administration. Octavian also had successes, such as establishing a professional bureaucracy, improving infrastructure, and constructing new buildings. In the short run, a good king can be more efficient than the republic. Before Octavian, there was Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Rome was in chaos, and Sulla was a brilliant, frustrated general. He looked at the bickering Senate and the slow-moving courts and saw only obstruction. He believed, with total, terrifying sincerity, that only his ideas could save Rome. The Republic had a safety valve, the 6-month dictatorship, a temporary sprint to fix a crisis. But Sulla looked at the clock and smashed it. He took power indefinitely. He told the people, I am not a tyrant. I am a doctor. I am just staying until the patient is cured. This is the Sulla trap. It is the belief that the goodness of your goals justifies the destruction of the process. We see it today in Viktor Orban, Yaroslav Kaczynski, Recep Erdogan, and Vladimir Putin. They present themselves as defenders of faith and traditional values against a morally decadent West and as custodians of their nation's sovereignty. Like Sulla, they view the law as a clog in the pipe of progress. The new Caesars use a powerful economic lure, protectionism. They promise to stop the leakage of workplaces to more efficient markets. In the short term, this feels like a victory. It saves a factory here. It protects a traditional industry there. It feels like taking back control. But history and economics teach us a brutal lesson. Isolated sovereignty is a poverty trap. By hampering global growth, these leaders derange the very economy they claim to save. They stall the reduction of poverty and the well-being of humanity by cutting the veins of trade and innovation. When you kill competition to protect the national champion, You kill the incentive to improve. You aren't building a fortress. You are building a museum that will eventually crumble. Here is the most dangerous part of the new Caesar's pitch, the idea that we can stand alone. The West faces a rising alliance of autocracies led by China. These are powers that do not value the individual, the contract, or the check. If the Western democracies retreat into a fragmented, every nation for itself mentality, refusing to resign even a fraction of their sovereignty to international cooperation, they will be picked off one by one. Without a unified Western front, we will not stand against global challenges. The next pandemic. Viruses do not respect national sovereignty. Uncontrolled migration. You cannot solve a regional exodus with a local wall. Unfair competition. Tax havens or applied by China subsidies, forced shares for counterparts in foreign enterprises, and theft of intellectual property. Reasonable measures to fight climate change. Measures that avoid free riders and the self-defeating approach of idealistic leaders like the European Union. The EU is currently seen as restricting itself with climate taxes, penalties, and restrictive legislation, such as mandating electric cars instead of fostering innovation and pursuing unrealistic goals like net zero emissions by 2050, which would entail unbearable costs for societies. The mechanics of the modern coup. Instead of tanks, the modern autocrat employs morally corrupt lawyers, utilizing the Augustan pretense to hollow out the state from within. Capture the referees. Capture the referees. In Poland and Hungary, the leaders didn't close the Supreme Courts and constitutional tribunals. They just changed the retirement age and transferred assignment rights to the ruling majority. They turned the judiciary into yes-man chambers. If the referee is wearing your team's jersey, you never lose a game. The deep state narrative. In Turkey and USA, we see the rise of the enemy within. If an auditor finds corruption, he is a saboteur. If a journalist asks a hard question, they are fake news. By attacking the institutions of accountability, the leader ensures that their power is never challenged. The efficiency illusion. These leaders promise speed. I alone can fix it, they say. And in the short term, they might. They can build the bridge or clear the square. But without the friction of checks and balances, there is no error correction. Cicero, the great defender of the Roman Republic, warned that the good king is a myth because power is a drug that destroys the mind of the user. When you remove the friction of dissent, you enter a yes-man echo chamber. Look at Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. When you spend 20 years jailing critics and capturing the media, no one is left to tell you the truth. You start to believe your own propaganda. You make catastrophic errors because you have destroyed the very mechanism, the check, that was designed to save you from your own ego. The Ciceronian diagnostic, how to spot the decay. How do you know if your contract is being shredded? Use these 3 tests. The referee test. Does the leader respect a court ruling that goes against them? If they attack the judge's character instead of the legal argument, the referee is under threat. The minority shield. Is the law being used to protect the individual or to punish the enemies of the ruling party? The succession question. If the leader you love had their power handed to someone you hate tomorrow, would you still feel safe? If the answer is no, you have centralized too much power. Conclusion. Sulla eventually retired, thinking he'd fixed the machine. But he had actually taught the next generation that the rules were for losers. He showed them that if you are sincere enough, you can break anything. A republic is not a gift. It is a task. It is a slow, often frustrating process of negotiation. It is boring because peace is boring. Conflict is exciting but conflict ends in ruins. Don't be seduced by the speed of the strong man. Don't believe the sincerity of the leader who asks for just a bit more power to fix the mess. Once you break the balance to save the state, there is nothing left of the state worth saving. The alluring death of the Republic begins with a cheer for a leader and ends with the silence of the law.